morning. So we're holding right now in the middle of DAF Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, about 9 lines from the top, where the Gemara begins Ki Asur Avdimi. So up until now, the Gemara has been discussing the mitzvah to be Mesameach L'Chasen V'Kala, which is a part of the mitzvah, which is included in the mitzvah of Achnasas Kala. So went through the different praises that they would sing as they danced in front of them. So the Gemara is going to give a different example of the praises. Ki Asur Avdimi Asa Hachi Mashru Kamek Kalasa B'Marava. When Rav Dimi came, he said, this is how they used to sing in front of the brides, the kalas in the west, which is in Eretz Yisrael. Like Echal v'lai sarak, without any makeup, v'lo pirchas, without their hair being done, v'yalas chen, and with all that, they still are beautiful. I mean, they're naturally beautiful. They don't need any other things to add beauty to them. Kisamchu. Now the Gemara is going to explain also where they use this same type of singing, same type of praises, not only with a kala, but in other instances as well. Ki samchu rabbanan leRabbi Zeir sharu lehachi leikachal v'leisarak v'leipirchas v'yalaschein. When the Rabbanan gave smicha to Reb Zeir, when they ordained Reb Zeir, so they sang also the same thing without any makeup, without any ornaments. Then already he's beautiful, which means that even though Reb Zeir dressed very simply, without any adornments, still his character, that was what made him stand out. That's what made him beautiful. That's what made him stick out. That was unique about him. Ki samchu rabbanan leRabbi Ami leRav Asi sharu lehacha. When they gave smicha to Rav Ami and Rav Asi, so the people sang like this, Kol min dain v'chol min dain samuchu. Anyone who's like this, like these people, like Rav Ami and Rav Asi, they should get smicha. Lanu. Loi sismacha lanu, but however, don't give smicha lo min sarmisim. Rashi explains, not from people who distort the halacha, v'lo min sarmitim, and not people who don't explain the halacha. They say what the halacha is without giving any explanation. V'yamila lo min chamisim. Some people say don't give smicha to people who withhold Torah, they don't try to share their Torah knowledge, v'lo min tormisim, and not from people who are bitter. Meaning we want people who are the most excellent character, we want people like Rav Ami and Rav Asi, they should get smicha, not anybody. Rav Avo, this is another example, the Gemara continuing throughout the Amud, there'll be different examples of praises that were given at different times. So Rav Avo, ki avi asimi mesifta leBay Kesar, when Rav Avo, he would go from his yeshiva to the house of Caesar, Nafkan Amsa de Bekesar La'ape. So the maids or the household of the Caesar would come out and greet him, and they would sing Hachi Rava de Ame, the prince of the people, Madbarana de Umse, the leader of the nation, Botzina de Nahara, like a lit candle, meaning that his beauty radiated, his appearance was unique. Brich Mesayach L'Shalom, that your coming should be blessed with peace, meaning that you should be successful. That's the Gemara. Finishes the different praises. Now we'll continue where the sugya began, and we'll discuss different ways they would dance with the kala to be misamech l'chasen kala. Amru alava Rabbi Yehuda bar Aryai. They said regarding Rabbi Yehuda bar Aryai, shayanoitel bad shel hadas u'merakel lifnei kala, that he would take a branch of a hadas, a myrtle branch, and he would dance in front of the kala. So the Mefarshim speak out. It's because he wanted to symbolize that Esther was a hadas. It's around Purim time, Rosh Chodesh Adar. So to say this over, that Esther was a hadas, and when she went into Paro, she had a chut of, she went into Achashverosh. Same thing. Into Achashverosh, she had a chut of chesed. The Malach put a chut of chesed on her, so we want to symbolize that this kala should also have that. The Amr Kalana v'Chasudin, he would sing like the Gemara began, they should sing how beautiful and how charming is the kala. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak miraked atlas. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak went even further, he danced while juggling 3 hadas branches. Amar Reb Zeira, so Reb Zeira saw this, he was disturbed, he said, Kamachsaf on Saba, you're embarrassing us, meaning a person in your stature shouldn't be dancing like this in front of the kala, it's inappropriate, you're embarrassing us. Kinach nafshe, after, when Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, he passed away, Ifsik amuda dinura bein didei lekuli ama. So a pillar of fire came down from Shemayim, from heaven, and it separated his bier, his coffin, between him and the rest of the nation. Like there was a fire between him that separated him. V'gemiri, and we have a tradition to lo afsik amuda dinura ela oile chad ledara bidara oile trei bidar. This is very unique that a fire coming down. I don't know if anyone's seen it here, but this is very unique, that it only happens even in the times of Chazal to just one or two in a generation. So this was, and Amar Reb Zera, and Reb Zera, who was the one who told him that you're embarrassing us, Ahanyele Shutse L'Saba. So Reb Zera said over that I know this was how did he merit this? How did he merit that the fire coming down? He merited it because the Hadas helped him achieve this honor. V'amila, some people say he said in a different way. She too say this l'saba, that he said over the foolishness of Shmuel Bar Yisach, meaning that he danced in a way that lowered.
This is from Dovid Melech.
Right, I was thinking about that. Yeah, mecharcher merakid lefnei the Aron over there.
That's before the Aron.
Yeah.
That's for, in other words, that you could say it's covenant Torah.
Right.
This is covenant Brios, but that's covenant Torah.
Right. Meaning that's what he wanted to. I hear.
You can't necessarily draw an analogy from it.
Yeah.
Some people say this his practice, and Taisus is interesting. Taisus, how did he know this? Who said it? He saw a pillar of fire came down. So Taisus says, Pirush Rabbi Menachem in the middle, he says, how did, in this third Taisus, how did he know that, how did Reb Zera know that he merited it because his dancing in front of the Kala? So Taisus says, the fire wasn't just the pillar of fire that was a pillar, but it was a fire in the shape of a Hadas branch. So he saw there was a connection between this fire and the Hadas branch. So that's how he knew that it had to be because of his dancing in front of a Kala that he merited this honor. Rav Acha Markav Lakis Kaspe Umarakid. The Gemara continues. Other practices. Rav Acha would take the Kala and put her on his shoulder and dance with her. Amr le'abanan anan mahu lemevad hachik. Are we allowed to do this? Amr lehu. So he told them back like this. Eat damyan alaychu kikshura. If when you're holding the Kala, that it's just like holding a beam, meaning you don't have you don't think about her at all, then l'chai, then it's okay. V'iloi. But if you're not holding on that level that you have no thoughts while carrying the Kala, then you can't do it. Then it's aser. Amar Rab Shmuel Bar Nachmani.
Not a problem with Maris Ayin here?
So I hear there's a problem of Maris Ayin.
They use chairs now.
Would it be a problem of Maris Ayin?
I mean, even if he was at that Madrego.
Everyone knew he was at the Madrego.
Right, that's what you'd have to say. Yes, you'd have to say.
Times in those
right.
No, only he could do that.
Yeah, you'd have to
use chairs.
They speak about dancing with a napkin. All these are all the shadows that come out from this Gemara. I'll come here. Yeah. Amar of Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar of Yonasan. Mutter lehistakel b'fnei Kala. Another halacha that it's mutter to gaze or to look intently at the face of a Kala.
Probably supposed to.
Kol shiva. Rashi says, Kedei l'chava b'bayla. Rashi says that in order to cause her to become endearing to her chassan. Rashi says, Kisharaya kol mestaklim ba nichnas yofeh b'liba. When he sees that everyone looking at her, he'll feel that she's really beautiful, and then he'll come to love her. The less hilchas hakavasi, but we say the halacha doesn't follow this statement, and it should not be done. So that's the Gemara how to dance with a Kala. Now the Gemara is going to shift gears a little bit and discuss when there's a conflict between two different mitzvahs. Which mitzvah comes first? One of the mitzvahs will be escorting the chassan and Kala. Tanarabanim ma'avir nes hameis milufnei Kala. So there's two processions going on. One's coming from one side of the street, let's say the north side of the street, that's the Kala, and from the other side of the street, there's a funeral. And now they both have to get to the opposite side. So who has to give way to who? That's the Gemara Shiloh. The Gemara says, Mavirin hameis milufnei Kala. When there's this conflict, so then the Kala goes first, and after that, then the mace could take over, could continue on its way. Vizel milifnei melech Yisrael. But now if there's, let's say, two of them, the Kala has a conflict with a king coming in the opposite direction, or a Levaya going in one direction, the king going in the opposite direction. So both have to let the king go first, and only then they could continue their procession. Amru alav al Agrippus HaMelech. The Gemara says they said about Agrippus HaMelech she'avar milifnei akala v'shibchuhu chachamim. They said about Agrippus HaMelech, who was a king by the end of the second Beis Hamikdash, so he was on his way, and a Kala was on his way. So what should the halacha be? The Kala should wait, and the king should go by, and then the Kala could continue. But instead, Agrippus, he let the Kala go first, and they praised him for that. The Gemara says, Shibchu, they praised him, Mechlal, the Shaparava, that implies that he did the correct thing. V'ha Amar Rav Ashi, afilu man da Amar nasi shemachal al kavaydei machal, melech shemachal al kavaydei ein kavaydei machal. But we learned that even according to the man da Amar, who says that a nasi could be meichal on his kavod, but a king could never be meichal on his kavod. The Amar Mar Saim Tasim Alecha Melech Shetei Masai Alecha. That the Pasuk gave a tzivah, a command that you have to put a king up on you, meaning put him on a pedestal, that you always have to have fear of him. So if he's able to be meichel his kavod, then that element of fear will be lost.
Well, I thought we learned that the king should not meichel his kavod.
He's not allowed to, right?
Yes, was Agrippa Jewish?
So he was not born Jewish. Taisus makes that point. That if you take a look at the next Taisus that we saw, the one before, even though he wasn't a full-fledged king like the Gemara in Saita, he really shouldn't have been king.
Was he from Yehuda?
Right. No, he shouldn't have been a king, but still, they honored him like a king, so therefore, and he represented, he shouldn't have been Michael.
I'm just that out.
Listen, Taisus asked the question. That's a great question.
Still, Sure brings the Gemara that says that he can be moch on his covenant if he does it privately, because it says Rabbi, he came down, he gave, I think it was Rabbi Yana, whoever kissed, his Gemara, and it says over there that he can be mocho as long as it's done privately, but
this would be a public.
Right.
Yes, So the Gemara answers. So how did Agrippa? So they asked the Gemara. So what did it seems like that a king could be meichel on his. The Gemara had finished saying that a king always comes first, and yet the people praised, or the Rabbanim praised Agrippa's for allowing the Kala to go first. So what's going on over here? The Gemara says Parshas Drachim Have. It was at a crossroads. Meaning up until now, the Gemara has been explaining there's one road, let's say the main throughway of the city, and there's one procession's coming from the north and the other one from the south. The question is which procession should let the other one go past. But here the Gemara said by Agrippa's, there was a crossroads. So what Agrippa's did, he made a right and allowed the Kala to continue straight. And he pretended that was always his intention the whole time. So therefore it didn't look like he was giving up any of his honor, because this is where he intended to go anyways. So he wasn't leaving the main road because of the Kala. So therefore they praised him that he allowed the Kala to go through in such a manner which wouldn't take away from any of his honor, and that was praiseworthy. The Gemara is now going to go. The next Gemara is going to discuss about.
Now we know this entire story, right?
What?
History tells the story that he was machal on his honor.
Privately.
Not privately.
Yes, no one knew.
Meaning after the fact.
No, but it already happened already. Now it's already happened. It's
either allowed or it's not allowed.
No, so if it's not allowed in a way that will cause him dishonor, that will cause people to not respect him as much. So since he did it in a way that it won't take away from his honor, because people seeing won't realize that this was his intention to be meichel his honor, so therefore you still have that element of fear of the king. So the Gemara continues. Tana Rabbanan. So now there's going to be, the next Gemara is going to discuss if a person is in the middle of learning or going to learn, really, they speak out, should he be involved in these mitzvahs or not? Tana
But
Rabbanim.
if people learn all the time, then obviously the answer is yes. Otherwise, they'll never do the mitzvahs, right?
No, so these specific mitzvahs. No, usually the rule is if mitzvah could be done by someone else, then you don't have. Then you shouldn't
If you're
stop.
learning all the time, and there's a levaya,
So that's the question.
so I think the answer is you'd go. Otherwise, you'd never go. You're
Could be.
supposed to learn. Some people learn all the time, right?
All right, so we'll find out.
Okay.
Taner Rabbanim mevatlin Talmud Torah leotzeos hameis v'lachnasas kala. A person should be mevatel, should stop learning in order to escort a mace or to perform the mitzvah of achnasas kala. Amru alav al Rabbi Yehuda. They said about Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Aryai, the son of Rabbi Aryai, shayim mevatel Talmud Torah leotzeos hameis v'lachnasas kala. And we found that Rabbi Yehuda Aryai also did the same thing, that he was mevatel Talmud Torah, he stopped learning in order to perform the mitzvah of achnasas kala and etzeos hameis, and to escort a mace. Now the Gemara qualifies this. When do we say that a person should stop learning? Only if here is the Gemara speaking about a mace, only if the deceased doesn't have enough. Well, we'll see. It could be. We'll see. Maybe even more than a minute. He doesn't have all that it's needed, that he needs. But if he has already everything that he needs, meaning there's enough people there, then no one should stop learning in order to add to the mitzvah. So how much is kol tzarka? Amar Rav Shmuel bar ini mishmei derav treisar alfi. So 12,000 gavri, 12,000 regular people, v'shita alfi shipuri, and another 6,000 people who blow shofars. So Rashi explains, what are they blowing shofars for? Apparently it was the minhag that Rashi says, machrizin alav sheyavo lechabdo. They would announce by blowing the shofar that the people should come and honor the deceased. So for a regular levaya, if there's not 12,000 people, 6,000 shofar blowing, then they have to be mevatel. V'yamri ala tleisar. Some say no, it's not. That's the incorrect number. We don't need 18,000. Tleisar alfi gavri. 13,000 is sufficient. Uminayu shita alfi shipuri. As long as within those 13,000, there's 6,000 shofar blowers. Ula amar. Ula says a different number. That there's a line of people from the city gate till the cemetery. That's already enough. Rav Sheshes v'itema Rabbi Yochanan Amar. A fourth opinion, nitilasa k'nesinasa. Rashi explains that means just like when the taking of the Torah, the removal of the Torah has to be the same way that the Torah was given, meaning we're discussing a sage who died. So the Talmud Chacham represents the Torah. So just like when the Torah was ma nesinasa b'shishim ribe, just like the Torah was given with 600,000. Af netilasa b'shishim ribe. So too when the Torah is removed, when the Talmud Chacham dies, so also we need 600,000 people to be there by the levaya. V'hani mili, and the Gemara says one step further. When do we say 600,000 people is enough? That's laman dekari v'tani. That's someone who learned chumash and mishnayos. Avolaman de masni less lehushir, but someone who taught others, then there's no shir, and everyone has to stop and be involved in the levaya. Rashi speaks out, but at a regular funeral, Yeshlom is asking Kedei Kevura Ba'alma, that's already enough. If there's enough people just to take care of the burial, let's say you said like a minyan, then that would be enough. That's the Gemara.
I think I needed 10 people like
for a
to
minute.
answer.
So it's a Kaddish.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then that's the Gemara. Now the Gemara in the Mishnah spoke out that at the beginning of the parak discussed there's a difference between the ksuba of an almana and the ksuba of a person getting married the first time and the ksuba of a person getting married the second time. And the Gemara went through what happens if you don't have the ksuba. So the Mishnah went through if you don't have the ksuba, so you don't know how much her ksuba should be. And he said there's circumstantial evidence that will tell us whether this was her first marriage and the second marriage. One of the things it said, if there are Eidim that saw that she went out behenuma. So the Gemara asks, "My henuma? What's a henuma?" Surchav bar Papa mishmei de zeiri amar tanura de asa. So Surchav bar Papa said, then the name of Zera, it's like a round chuppah made up with hadassim, like a myrtle chuppah. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kraisa dimamnamana bakalasa. It was a veil. Rashi said the veil was so thick that she couldn't, the kala couldn't see anything, and so sometimes she'd fall asleep during the chasen, and that's what it means. It was a veil that would ate her and sleeping, whatever. That's the Rabbi Yochanan Mabroka gave another thing. They would pass out these dried nuts, parched nuts, and the Gemara said Tana be Yehuda Raya. These are all examples in Yehuda that would be a Raya. Bebavel Mai, what would be a proof in Bavel? What evidence would tell us in Bavel what her status was at the time of her chasana? Amar Rav Darduge de Mishka Aresha de Rabbanan. Apparently there was this custom that they would rub oil on the heads of the Rabbanan if it was a girl's first wedding. I'm glad they stopped this. Amar le Rav Faivel Abaye Mishka de Chafifusa Kamar. What did they all needed shampoo? Amar le Yasmalei. So he's meaning like, what's this custom? Amar le Yasmalei Avdalach Imach Dardugi Mishka Aresha de Rabbanan B'Shas Ma'isa. So this is what you lost out. They didn't put oil on the heads of the Rabbanan at the Bayur Chasana. Ki Yahud de Rabbanan me Rabbanan de Isasik le Lebrei be Rabba Bar Ula v'Yamile Rabba Bar Ula Yasik le Lebrei Bar be Hahume Rabbanan, like Rabba Bar Ula made a chasana for someone else's son, or someone made a chasana for Rabba Bar Ula's son. Vidar dig Mishka Resha de Rabbanan, and they poured oil on the heads of the Rabbanan B'Shas Ma'isa during the chasana. So that was apparently in Bavel. That was the custom that they would pour oil, and that's how they knew.
What's this significance?
I was trying to look around. I didn't really see anything.
The rabbis were greasers.
Yeah.
The rabbis were greasers.
Yeah, I didn't really see anything. Does it say anything on the bottom over by you? No?
Why?
It doesn't say what. I wasn't able to find something. Yeah. Armalasa Mai, how do you know? Is there any proof that there would be? In Yehuda, how do they know that it was not a woman's first marriage? Tani Bar Yosef Armalasa less like Kisna. Meaning in Bavel it would be very easy to tell. They wouldn't do this oil thing, but in Yehuda, how did they know that it wasn't a woman's first marriage? They said they wouldn't pass out these parched grains. That's the Gemara. Now the Gemara is going to go to the second part of the Mishnah, which is Rabbi Yeshua said a halacha that said if someone goes over to a friend he's right now living in a field, then he goes over to his friend and says, you know what, this field used to belong to your father, but I bought it from him. So Rabbi Yeshua says that person's believed. And the reason why he's believed is because if he wouldn't have said anything, no one would ever know. So he brought the whole court case on himself. So since he brought it, since anyways the whole court case is coming from me, so believe me when I say that this is what really happened. So the Gemara is going to now discuss that. Velisni asked the Gemara, why do you have to run to a case where a guy goes over to someone else and says that field belonged to your father? Why don't you say the field belonged to you and I bought it from you? Why did it have to make a case that it was someone else's field that he bought from him? Mishum, the Gemara answers, Mishum de Kabai lemisni seifa, because he wants to say the seif of the Mishnah. What's the seif of the Mishnah? Yesh edim shehi shelo. If there are edim who said that it belonged originally to the father of this person who was approached, v'hu amar lekachti amimenu eina neman, and the guy who's living on the field now says it's true it was your father's, but I bought it from him, then that person is not believed, because the whole reason why that person is believed is because he was the one who initiated it. But since Adam came, and now we no longer need the person's who's living on the field, his testimony, so then he lost all his credibility, and therefore he's not believed. So the Gemara says, Hey chidami. Let's see, if he goes over to a person and says, it was your field but I bought it from you, and then Adam come and say that it was that person's field, then he's not believed. So the Gemara says, Hey chidami, what's going on? What's the case? Ida achla shnei chazaka. The halacha was, if a person ate 3 years in someone else's field, and the owner of the field, or the older owner the previous owner didn't say anything, then even if we know that the field used to belong to him, we no longer say that the field belonged to him. It belongs to the person who's been living on the field for the 3 years. So if he ate in the field for the 3 years of chazaka, amayla mehem, why is the person who's now living in the field not believed? Meaning, even though Adam came and said that the field originally belonged to someone else, at this point it doesn't belong to that person, because the person who's living on the field now has been living there for 3 years. Videlo achla shnei chazaka, and if he hasn't been living there for 3 years, it's pshita. Obviously he's not believed, because why should he believe when the first person has Adam supporting his case? Ihachi, the Gemara says, so why is it better than... So what's the other option? The other option is making a case where a person goes over to someone else and says it was your father's field. Why is that any better? Gabi Aviv Nama, you have the same question. Ida achla shnei chazaka amai lo mehemen. If the person's been living there for the 3 years of chazaka, why is he not believed? Vida lo achla shnei chazaka pshita de lo mehemen. And if he hasn't been living there for 3 years, and it's obvious that he's not believed to say that it was your father's field, once Adam came and also said it was his father's field. The Gemara answers like this: Bishlam agabi aviv. Like, what's the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question started off by saying, why do I have to pick a case where someone went over to someone else and said it's your father's field? Let me just pick a case where I went over to someone and said it was his field. So the Gemara tries to first say that there's a difference. It depends on if it was the person's field, then it makes a difference if he ate 3 years of chazaka. But if it's the father's field, then it won't make a difference of whether he ate 3 years of chazaka or not. The Gemara says that's not a difference. So we're back to the original question: why do I pick a case where he went to someone and said it was his father's field? Why don't I say that he went to him and said it was your field, but I bought it off you? So bishlam agabi aviv mishkachas la kagon she'achla shnayim b'chayi ha'av ve'achas b'chayi b'no. So the Gemara says, when I have a case, really right now we're stuck. We have no case because it all depends on whether he ate years of chazaka or not. So the Gemara explains, I have one case where it's possible for him to eat there 3 years, and still it will make a difference whether Adam come or Adam don't come. What's the case? That he said that the field belonged to the father. He lived in the field 2 years while the father was still alive, and 1 year after the father died. And the son inherited it while he was and he lived 2 years during the father's lifetime, and 1 year during the child's lifetime. And it will go like Rav Huna, which Rav Huna says that a person can make a chazaka. That means he can't live in a miner's field for 3 years and say that now I have a chazaka. You see, I lived here 3 years. So the case will be like this: I lived in the father's house during the father's lifetime 2 years. Then the son inherited the field while he was still a miner, so he only lived there 1 year. And that year he lived while the child was a minor, so that chazaka is no longer helpful because one part of it was done while he was a minor, and then it makes no difference how long he's lived there after that, because once if a person comes into the field while the field is owned by a minor, then his chazaka doesn't help.
Don't we say there's a zika from the father?
So he's inherited.
I'm saying the equivalent of of a zika. In other words, it's already established. Chazakas began when the father was there.
But he has to have. But
he has to complete it.
He has to. A person. If a guy lives in someone else's field for a year and then takes a break for a year and then comes back for a year, and that's not a chazak.
That's different. This is not a hefsek. This is continuous. It's based on the original.
But part of the logic of the chazak is that I'm living there for so long. So if it's really yours, why aren't you saying anything? So by a minor, that's not really a claim. He doesn't. We don't.
They usually have an administrator for a minor, so there wouldn't be his responsibility to make a claim?
So then he has to know about it, or the minor didn't tell him, or that it wasn't set up yet. Like it would. Yeah. For Rav Huna, the Gemara asks, if this is the only way we could understand the Mishnah, so what did Rav Huna add? So that's the Mishnah, his halacha, that a person, that the chazaka of a minor while living in a minor's field doesn't help. The Gemara says, Rav Huna came to explain the Mishnah. Because you see, we were struggling with the Mishnah, and it was only after Rav Huna introduced us to his halacha, which he understood from the Mishnah, that we understand it. Rav Huna, if you look closer, Rav Huna didn't say, by a person, a person can't have a chazaka on the property of a katan. He added words, afilu higdil, even after the katan grew up. It means even if he's living, let's say, a year while he's still a katan, then 15 years after he became a gadol, at that point, since he came into the field and while the owner was a minor, then the chazaka doesn't help at all. So that's the Gemara. So the Gemara says, wait 1 second, you haven't fully explained it. V'lisni b'didei. So why don't we say, I have a case. We explain now why it has to be the father, because how else do you have 3 years? The Gemara now asks, I have a case. Imagine if he eats 2 years by the owner, meaning, let me say I'll go over to guy and say, it was my field, but it was your field, but I bought it from you. What was the question? So, if he has a chazakah, then he's believed. If he doesn't have a chazakah, then he's not believed. So what's the case? So the Gemara says, I have a case now. I have a case where he lived there 2 years, then the owner of the field ran away, so then the 3rd year of chazakah is worthless, because the whole purpose of a chazakah is only, right, that he's eating in front of the owner, and here he's not. Let me get, a case could be where he ate 2 years in front of the owner, 1 not in front of him. Whoa, how would that happen? The owner of the field ran away. Baruch machmas. The Gemara says, wait 1 second. Why is he running away? Either Baruch machmas nefashas. If he's running away because there's a threat to his life, then pshita. Then it's obvious delo mehemen. That's not a chazak at all. Then it's worthless. Delo matzi machi. He can't make a macha. Once he makes a macha, once he says, wait 1 second, what are you doing in my field? Then everyone will know where he is. Then his life will be over. And if he's running away because people are trying to take money from him, then he could have made a macha, he could have spoken up. The kaimalan macha shalai b'fanav having macha, because the halach is if someone makes a macha, even not in front of the person who's living in the field, but in front of 2 other people, he makes a macha, that macha is good. Rashi explains, because if you tell 2 people are friends, and those 2 people have other friends, and eventually word spreads. Ditnan, like we learned in the Mishnah, Shalosh aratzos lechazaka, Yehuda ve'ever, Yarden v'agalo. There are 3 lands for chazaka, meaning there are 3 areas where chazaka's help. There's 1 area is Yehuda, 1 is the Transjordan, and 1 is in the Galil. Haya be Yehuda. What happens if someone was living in Yehuda v'hechsek begalil, and someone went into his field in the Galil and made a chazaka, or begalil v'hechsek beYehuda, or he was living in Galil and someone went into his field which was in Yehuda? That ain't a chazaka. That's not a chazaka. Meaning because that's a different area, so he won't have heard about it. One of the reason why a chazaka works is because we assume that the owner heard about it. So if the owner's living in the Yehuda and the field is in the Yehuda, even if it's the opposite side of Yehuda, it's a different city, but everything that goes on in Yehuda people hear about. But if he's in Galil and someone sitting in his field in Yehuda, then he won't have heard about it. So then that chazaka doesn't have any value, because he could not have made a macha. He couldn't have said, "What are you doing in my field?" since he didn't hear about it. The Gemara says, my kasavar. What's going on? The Gemara asks, what do you say that a macha, meaning a complaint against the person who's squatting in the field, is a macha even if it's not in front of him? So even if there are different areas for chazak, even if one's in Yehuda and one's in Galil. Then even if they're living in 2 separate cities, in Yehuda is a problem because it's not in front of him. The Gemara says, really we're going that a macha not in front of a person is a macha, meaning he doesn't have to go over to the person who's squatting in his field and say, please leave my field, but as long as he does in front of 2 Adam, that's already enough. But the Mishnah is going then the different areas are hostile to each other, and therefore the news won't spread. So meaning if someone's in Yehuda and someone's in Galil, then the news won't spread, so then he can't know, and his macha is worthless, he won't know about it. The macha, even if he did find out about the macha, the complaint won't ever get back to the person who's squatting in his field, so therefore the chazaka is not a chazaka, and it doesn't help. But either way, what do we see from here? We had asked, why don't we say that the case in the Mishnah could be a guy goes over to someone and says, you're sitting in my field, and we ask, how will it work out with chazakas? And we came up with a case that he could be living in front of the person for 2 years, and in the 3rd year he ran away. So we see from here that's not an option, because we come out from this Gemara that a macha, a complaint, even not in front of the person who's squatting in a field, is a good complaint. So if he ran away because of money, then he should have made the complaint. So therefore we have to understand the Mishnah that it's going where he approached someone and says, I'm living in the field that I bought from your father. That's how we have to understand the Mishnah.
And then we rely on Lashon Hara to spread the word.
Well, this is one of the big. This is a riot to Apei Tlasa comes from this.
What is it?
Apei Tlasa. It's saying in front of, if you have 3 people. The start of it comes, a lot of the halachas are learned out from here. Different cities,
Not
different
three,
this.
they keep saying 2.
Right, so no, but if you, and different cities, right. Could you, if you hear around 3 in one city, tell it over in a different city, these are. So once you're saying it's a state of hostility, so why pick Yehuda and Galil? Just pick 2 cities in Yehuda or 2 cities in Galil. Why did it choose this example? This Dam Yehuda v'Galil k'shas chayrim dami. They were always at odds with each other. So whenever you hear Yehuda and Galil, you assume that there is a breach between them and news won't travel. Shkaya.